The War of 1812 was the United States' first large-scale conflict since its inception as a sovereign nation. The tensions that burned in the years leading up to the war ranged from land to sea, from ink and quill to ball and musket. Each successive cause in Mr. Madison's war did its part to lean America towards open conflict, such a conflict that would go down in history. During the Napoleonic Wars, Great Britain and France were deadlocked in conflict. Beginning in 1806, Napoleon issued the Berlin Decree on November 21, 1806. In this decree, Napoleon declared that the importing of British goods into European countries either allied with or dependent on France to be forbidden. The next year, Napoleon instituted the Milan Decree to help enforce the Berlin Decree. In retaliation, the British Parliament issued a series of orders in council. These orders closed any European ports under French control to foreign shipping, unless these vessels first stopped at a British port. France's decrees, coupled with the British orders in council, meant that American merchant vessels were threatened with confiscation on both sides. From 1808 to 1811, Great Britain seized the ships of 6,000 American sailors, impressing them under the justification that these seamen were in fact British-born and thus British citizens. Americans on the mainland watched helplessly as their fellow sailors were forced into British service, causing bitter resentment towards the crown. The issue of impressment spurred a serious incident between the United States and Great Britain. In 1807, deserters of the HMS Melipus enlisted aboard the frigate USS Chesapeake while docked at Norfolk, Virginia. The British consul demanded their return. However, Secretary of State James Madison refused to give these sailors back, stating that they were Americans to begin with, and they were victims of British impressment. Tensions heightened until British Vice Admiral George C. Berkeley ordered any British warship that happened to encounter the Chesapeake to stop it and conduct searches for the men. On June 21, 1807, the HMS Leopard sighted the Chesapeake on the Virginian Capes. An order by British Captain Salisbury Humphreys to search the Chesapeake was blatantly denied by Commodore James Barron. Barron instead ordered his ship to prepare for battle. After a heated exchange between Humphreys and Barron, the Leopard first fired a warning shot, then a full broadside into the Chesapeake. Barron was unable to retaliate in time and surrendered. The American people cried to President Thomas Jefferson to fight back, but instead, Jefferson chose a diplomatic course in that he closed American waters to British warships, secured the freedom of the deserters, and demanded an end to impressment. The British apologized for the Chesapeake-Leopold affair, stating that it was a mistake, and paid for damages. However, Britain continued its free reign on impressment on American citizens. After the outcry sparked by the Chesapeake-Leopard affair, Jefferson went on to implement the Embargo Act of 1807. Prohibiting American exports to all overseas ports, this act effectively ended American foreign trade at that time. In a drastic attempt to save America, Jefferson thought the Embargo Act would end the threat of impressment by removing American merchant ships from the water while choking Great Britain and France of U.S. goods at the same time. With a voluntary cutoff of its exports, the European nations would be forced to respect the United States' rights. Adverse to Jefferson's intentions, the Embargo Act sparked an even worse outcry from the American Republic and failed, crippling the economy. Madison, now president, replaced the hated Embargo Act with the Non-Intercourse Act of 1809, solely aimed at Great Britain and France. Revised in 1810, Macon's Bill No. 2 emerged, and promised to Britain and France that if one repealed its commercial restrictions, the United States would place an embargo on the other. Napoleon accepted the offer. Word came that France would lift its decrees if Britain repealed its orders in council. Madison gambled that exclusive trade with France would force Britain to repeal its restrictions. The United States and France came to an agreement. Britain had 3 months to lift its orders in council and reopen Atlantic neutral trade. Britain declined, and Madison saw no other way but reinstating the embargo on Britain, a decision that Madison feared was yet another step closer to all-out war. In the age of American Western expansion, Americans such as Governor William Henry Harrison helped negotiate various removal treaties with the Native Americans. Opposed to Harrison's goals, Shawnee Indian chief Tecumseh made a deal with British Canada, accepting aid and an alliance if war broke out. Harrison caught word of the Indian-British agreement and attempted to break the Confederacy by killing Tecumseh's brother Prophet at the Battle of Tippecanoe on November 7, 1811. During this period, American settlers lived in constant fear of Indian attacks, blaming increased violence on the support and encouragement of the natives by Canada. Their hatred of Britain, coupled with the conflicts on the sea, led to the nationalistic aspirations of a new group known as the Warhawks. These spirited politicians, such as Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun, called for war with Britain to finally put an end to the hostilities between the two countries. Though the American military was extremely weak, King George III did not wish to fight Napoleon and the Americans on two different fronts. Talks to finally lift their orders in council and normalizing trade with the United States went underway. Unaware of Britain's call for negotiation, Clay and the President steered the House and Senate towards the declaration of war. On June 18, 1812, Madison signed the Declaration and plunged the United States into what some people call America's Second War for Independence. The War of 1812 had begun.